The bell rang sharply through the quiet halls of Willow Creek Academy, a prestigious private school where appearances were everything. Laughter, whispers, and the clatter of expensive shoes filled the air. But tucked away at the very back of room 23 sat a little girl with tangled hair, a patched-up backpack, and a nervous twist to her smile. No one noticed her. No one cared to. Until the wrong person did, and one careless insult would unleash a chain of consequences that no one, not even the teacher, could ever have predicted. Mrs. Hawthorne prided herself on being the best. She ran her classroom like a tight ship. Neat rows, perfect uniforms, quiet discipline. To her, a child's worth wasn't measured by kindness or creativity. It was polished shoes, crisp haircuts, and the right last name. When she first laid eyes on Sophie Miller, unkempt, wearing shoes with frayed laces, her lips pursed automatically. Unacceptable. Mrs. Hawthorne scanned the roster. Sophie Miller. New transfer. No background notes. No introduction from the headmaster. A nobody. Sophie shrank under the weight of the teacher's disapproving gaze. As the weeks dragged on, Sophie tried to blend in. She kept her head down, answered softly, did her homework meticulously, but it didn't matter. The rich kids snickered behind her back. She smells funny. Look at her backpack. Her hair's like a rat's nest. Mrs. Hawthorne never stopped them. Sometimes she even smirked. One rainy Tuesday morning, Sophie raised her hand to answer a question about American history. Mrs. Hawthorne scanned her threadbare sweater and scuffed sneakers and let out a sharp laugh. Maybe you should focus on personal hygiene before trying to solve history, Sophie. The classroom exploded in laughter. Sophie's cheeks burned crimson. She lowered her hands slowly. And in that moment, something inside her dimmed. From that day on, Sophie changed. She no longer raised her hand. She no longer met anyone's eyes. She became a ghost inside the room. Mrs. Hawthorne barely noticed. She was too busy lavishing praise on the polished, wealthy students, the children of donors, politicians, and CEOs. Sophie's papers, once neat and thoughtful, grew messy, rushed. Her grades slipped. Mrs. Hawthorne shook her head with mock sadness at parent-teacher conferences. Some children just don't belong, she would say, folding her hands primly. But not everyone was cruel. Once, when Mrs. Hawthorne stepped out of the classroom, Sophie noticed another student crying over a broken art project. Quietly, without seeking attention, Sophie slipped her own set of markers and papers, the few she had, onto the girl's desk. When the teacher returned, she scolded Sophie for being out of place.
No one else noticed.
But the security camera in the corner of the room did, and someone was watching. One Friday afternoon, an announcement came over the intercom. All staff and students to the assembly hall. Important visitor arriving. Excitement buzzed through the halls. Rumor had it that the CEO of Willow Creek's largest donor company was coming, Mr. Jameson, to personally inspect the school. Mrs. Hawthorne straightened her skirt and patted her hair, heart racing. This was her chance to shine. Students lined up in perfect rows, except Sophie. Her shirt was untucked, her hair frizzed from the rain. Mrs. Hawthorne's face darkened. "Fix yourself, Sophie," she hissed. "You're an embarrassment." Sophie said nothing. Her small hands twisted nervously. The door swung open. A tall man in a tailored suit strode into the hall, Mr. Jameson himself. Power seemed to radiate from him. Everyone straightened their backs. The teachers plastered on bright, fake smiles. Mrs. Hawthorne nearly swooned. Principal Avery hurried forward, hand outstretched. "Mr. Jameson, we're honored by your visit." Mr. Jameson barely glanced at him. His eyes scanned the room, over the polished students, over the gleaming stage, until they landed on the smallest, quietest figure at the end of the row. Sophie! Gasps rippled through the crowd as Mr. Jameson strode past the principal, past the rows of spotless students, and knelt in front of Sophie. His voice broke the stunned silence. "There you are, my little girl," he said warmly. He pulled Sophie into a tight hug, pressing a kiss to her forehead. Mrs. Hawthorne's mouth fell open. Whispers exploded around the room. "Is she his? She's the CEO's daughter?" Mrs. Hawthorne staggered backward, color draining from her face. Mr. Jameson straightened and faced the crowd, his arm around Sophie's trembling shoulders. "I'd like to introduce my daughter," he said, voice firm. Sophie Jameson. Mrs. Hawthorne's mind raced. The ragged clothes, the messy hair, the way she mocked Sophie humiliated her. Her legs wobbled. She opened her mouth to speak, to explain, to apologize, but no words came. Sophie looked up at her father, eyes wide, filled with unshed tears. "Can we go home now?" she whispered. Mr. Jameson nodded, his voice hard. "Yes. You don't belong here, not with people like this." The teachers flinched. Mrs. Hawthorne paled further. As Mr. Jameson led Sophie away, he turned to Principal Avery. "I'll be scheduling a full review of Willow Creek Academy." And starting with room 23, he added coldly, staring directly at Mrs. Hawthorne. Principal Avery stammered. Of course, sir." Mrs. Hawthorne tried to smile, tried to recover, but she knew. It was too late. Sophie was no longer the invisible little girl in the back of the room. She was the one person who had the power to tear it all down. Later that night, in the shadows of the empty school office, Mrs. Hawthorne rifled through old records, frantic, desperate. She pulled Sophie's transfer file. Her hands trembled as she scanned the papers. And there, at the bottom, was a confidential note: child placed under new identity for protection following attempted kidnapping of CEO's family. Mrs. Hawthorne staggered back, gasping. She hadn't just insulted a student. She had humiliated a child hidden for her own safety and exposed her. And someone dangerous, might have been watching. The camera pans out from the dark office and fades to black. The next morning, Mrs. Hawthorne sat trembling in the principal's office. Principal Avery paced the room, furious. "Do you realize what you've done?" he hissed. "Mr. Jameson is threatening to pull every dollar he's donated, not to mention suing for endangerment." Mrs. Hawthorne wrung her hands. I didn't know," she stammered. "No one told me who she was." Principal Avery slammed a folder onto the desk. "You didn't need to know. You needed to treat her like any other child." Mrs. Hawthorne bit her tongue, burning with shame and bitterness. She wasn't used to being the villain, but now the entire school saw her that way. And it was only going to get worse. Sophie clutched her father's hand tightly as they walked through the gleaming lobby of Jameson Enterprises. Gone was the shy girl, hiding in the shadows. She had her father now, and he was determined to protect her at any cost. Mr. Jameson knelt in front of her. "You're going to a new school, sweetheart," he said softly. "One where no one will ever treat you that way again." Sophie nodded bravely, but deep down, she knew the past had a way of following you, no matter how far you ran. By Monday, Willow Creek Academy was crawling with investigators. Internal audits, background checks, interviews. They weren't just looking into Mrs. Hawthorne's behavior, they were uncovering something bigger. Years of quiet complaints about discrimination, favoritism, bullying, all swept under the rug to protect the school's prestigious image, and Mrs. Hawthorne's name kept coming up. She wasn't just harsh with Sophie. There were others, other invisible students who had been belittled, shamed, forgotten. The administration had covered for her, but now, no one was coming to her defense. Late one evening, Mrs. Hawthorne sat alone in her dim apartment, the rain tapping against the window. Her hands trembled as she flipped through old papers, desperate to find something, anything that could save her career. Then she remembered. A file. A forgotten report from the previous year. A disciplinary warning Sophie's father had tried to bury involving the attempted kidnapping of his daughter. If that report leaked, if certain enemies learned Sophie's real identity, maybe Mrs. Hawthorne could shift the blame. Maybe she could make herself valuable again. Her fingers hovered over her phone, torn between fear and selfish survival. Meanwhile, Sophie settled into her new school. It was smaller, warmer. Teachers smiled, students shared. But Sophie couldn't shake the feeling that shadows still followed her. Her father had increased security. Unmarked cars waited outside the school. Guards disguised as janitors kept watch. Sophie wasn't just a student anymore. She was a target. And someone, somewhere had just learned she existed. Back at Willow Creek, Mrs. Hawthorne composed an anonymous email. She attached the old disciplinary report. No names. Just enough hints. Just enough to light a fuse. She hit send, hands shaking. It was done. 2 hours later, as Mrs. Hawthorne poured herself a glass of wine, there was a sharp knock at the door. She froze. Another knock, louder this time. Mrs. Hawthorne, a cold voice called. "Open the door. We need to talk." Her blood ran cold. Something was wrong. Very wrong. When she cracked open the door, 2 men in dark suits pushed inside. Not police. Not school officials. Someone else. Someone who wasn't supposed to know where she lived. The taller man smiled thinly. "You made a mistake," he said, pulling a photo from his jacket, a photo of Sophie. "Now you're going to help us find her." Miles away, Sophie sat cross-legged on her new bed, braiding her doll's hair, blissfully unaware, blissfully innocent. But outside, a black sedan idled at the curb, engine humming quietly in the dark. And in the front seat, a figure watched her window, waiting. The screen fades to black. Mrs. Hawthorne backed away from the two men now standing in her living room. Their presence filled the space with menace, the kind of danger she had only seen on the news until now. One of them, the taller one, tossed a manila envelope onto her coffee table. Inside were photos of Sophie, photos of her new school, photos of her home. Mrs. Hawthorne's heart dropped. "You're going to help us," the shorter man said, voice like gravel, "or we make sure the authorities learn about your misconduct." Mrs. Hawthorne's mouth went dry. She was trapped. Help them find Sophie or watch her life spiral into ruin. Tears blurred her vision. She whispered, "What do you want me to do?" Across town, Sophie sat in her new classroom, her small hands twisting nervously in her lap. Her new teacher, Mr. Daniels, was different from Mrs. Hawthorne, but Sophie couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right. There were too many glances from outside, too many strange cars parked across the street. Her father reassured her. "We're safe now, princess," he said, kissing the top of her head. But Sophie knew. Sometimes monsters didn't look like monsters. Sometimes they wore friendly faces. Back in her apartment, Mrs. Hawthorne was given simple instructions. Text the strangers the location of Sophie's next school event. Keep quiet. Walk away. Simple. Cold. Mrs. Hawthorne clutched her phone, guilt clawing at her chest. Was this who she had become? A woman willing to trade a child's safety for her own? She thought about the way Sophie had looked at her in class, afraid, small, trying so hard to be good. Mrs. Hawthorne pressed her hands against her face and wept, but when she lowered her hands, she texted the location anyway. That Friday, Willow Hollow Elementary buzzed with excitement. The school was hosting a family reading night where parents and children shared stories together. Sophie sat in the back row, her hair neatly braided, clutching a well-worn copy of Charlotte's Web. Her father, Mr. Jameson, was supposed to arrive soon. The lights dimmed. Laughter and chatter filled the room. Outside in the gathering shadows, a black sedan pulled up. Two men stepped out, coats pulled tight against the cool night air. They didn't belong, but no one noticed. Not yet. At home, Mrs. Hawthorne paced, phone clutched in her sweaty palm. Regret gnawed at her. This wasn't just a mistake. This was a sin. Finally trembling, she grabbed her jacket and keys. She had to warn them. Had to try. Because if anything happened to Sophie, it would be on her soul forever. Inside the school, Sophie shifted in her seat. Something made the hairs on the back of her neck prickle. Through the window, she saw a dark shape moving toward the side door. The fire exit. A place where no teachers were standing guard. She clutched her book tighter, heart pounding. Mr. Jameson still hadn't arrived. The principal took the stage, smiling brightly, unaware of the growing danger. And outside, the men moved closer. One pulled a set of tools from his pocket, expertly working the lock. At the last second, a security guard newly hired by Mr. Jameson spotted them. "Hey, stop right there!" The men bolted. Sophie screamed. The room erupted into chaos. Parents shouted. Children cried. Teachers tried to usher the kids into the hallway. Sophie stumbled backward into a stranger's arms. The taller man. His grip was tight, ironclad. She kicked and screamed. Mr. Daniels, her teacher, rushed forward, grabbing Sophie's other arm, struggling to pull her free. The man snarled, then fled, disappearing into the night. Moments later, Mr. Jameson burst into the building, breathless, panic in his eyes. He scooped Sophie into his arms, holding her so tightly she gasped. "I'm so sorry," he whispered over and over, voice cracking. Sophie clung to him, burying her face in his chest. Security surrounded them, police cars flooded the lot. It was over. For now. In the commotion, no one noticed Mrs. Hawthorne's car screeching into the lot. She stumbled out, heart in her throat, racing toward the police. "I know who's behind this," she shouted desperately. "I can help you find them." An officer grabbed her, confused. "Who are you?" "I'm the reason they found her," she sobbed. And in her trembling hand, she held her phone open to a thread of text between herself and the kidnappers. Proof. Confession. A final desperate attempt at redemption. But the damage had been done. Across town, in a darkened office, a phone buzzed. A hand picked it up. A voice, low, cold, dangerous, spoke. "Plan A failed. Move to Plan B." A second voice responded. "Understood. We have another way to get to her." The camera pans up to reveal a corkboard wall filled with photos of Sophie, her father, her new school. And in the center, pinned with a single nail, a photo of Daniel, Mr. Jameson's trusted driver, circled in red ink. Because sometimes, the greatest threat comes from the people you trust the most. Screen fades to black. 2 days passed. Security around Sophie doubled. Armed guards patrolled her school, home, and even her father's office. Everyone assured Mr. Jameson that Sophie was safe,
that the danger had passed.
that nothing could touch her now. But Daniel, Mr. Jameson's personal driver and longtime employee, hid a secret behind his calm smile. Because when the kidnappers' first plan failed, they had found another way in. And Daniel was their way in. Rachel, Mr. Jameson's head of security, couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. She had worked alongside Daniel for years, trusted him. But lately he was different, jumpy, distracted, always making excuses to be alone with the security feeds or change the car schedules. Rachel approached Mr. Jameson quietly one morning. "I don't like this," she said. Jameson frowned. "Daniel's been with us for a decade," he said. "He's family." Rachel's mouth tightened. Sometimes it's family you should fear the most. That night, Daniel sat alone in his small apartment. A burner phone buzzed on the table. He stared at it with dead eyes. He hadn't wanted this. He hadn't planned for this. But debt and threats had cornered him. "You'll just deliver her to the second location," the voice on the other end said weeks ago. "Nice and easy. No one gets hurt. You get your life back." Daniel pressed his palms into his eyes. Sophie had smiled at him that morning. The pure, trusting smile of a child who didn't know monsters wore familiar faces. And yet, he picked up the burner phone and texted, "Tomorrow, 3 p.m., school pickup." Sophie laughed as she skipped down the school steps, her backpack bouncing. Daniel stood by the black town car, holding the door open with his usual gentle smile. "Hey, Munchkin," he said warmly. "Ready to go home?" Sophie nodded brightly. Rachel stood across the parking lot, arms crossed, watching. Something gnawed at her instincts, something she couldn't name. But before she could act, a scream shattered the air. From the far side of the lot, a van screeched into view. Men in masks jumped out, weapons drawn. Parents shrieked, pulling children away. Security guards scrambled, but the attackers moved fast, trained. Daniel froze. This wasn't the plan. They were supposed to be subtle, a quiet delivery, not an ambush. Panic tore through him. He grabbed Sophie and ducked behind the car as bullets ripped through the lot. Sophie whimpered, clutching his jacket. "It's okay," he whispered. "I've got you." But inside, he knew he had already lost control. Rachel drew her weapon and sprinted toward them, shouting orders. Daniel's mind raced. He could run now, hand Sophie over, wipe his hands clean. Or he could make it right. He looked down at Sophie's terrified face and made a choice. As 2 masked men rounded the car, Daniel launched forward. He tackled the first man, grabbing the gun and smashing it into the second's face. Blood spattered the windshield. Rachel reached them seconds later, covering Daniel as he fought like a man possessed. "You're not taking her," Daniel roared. In the chaos, Sophie crawled under the car, sobbing. More sirens screamed in the distance. Backup was coming. But so were more attackers. Once the men were subdued and zip-tied, Rachel pinned Daniel against the car, gun at his chest. "Talk," she barked. "Now." Daniel gasped for breath, shaking. "I was working with them," he admitted hoarsely. "I was supposed to help them take her." Rachel's finger twitched on the trigger. "But I changed my mind," Daniel said desperately. "I couldn't do it." Rachel's jaw tightened. Behind her, Mr. Jameson arrived, running to scoop Sophie into his arms. His eyes locked onto Daniel's broken, pleading face. A lifetime of trust shattered in a heartbeat. Rachel shoved Daniel toward the arriving police. Mr. Jameson cradled Sophie close, his heart breaking. And then, another phone buzzed. Rachel pulled it from one of the attacker's pockets. A single, chilling message glowed on the screen. Phase 1 failed. Phase 2 initiated. Target Mr. Jameson. Rachel's blood ran cold. She turned to Mr. Jameson, shouting over the sirens. "They weren't just after Sophie. They're coming for you." The screen fades to black. The flashing red and blue lights of police cars painted the night sky in frantic colors. Mr. Jameson clutched Sophie tightly, shielding her from the chaos around them. Rachel barked orders into her radio, her face grim. "We need to move them now." Officers swarmed the scene, but deep down, everyone knew. The Fairchild incident had taught them one thing: Even the safest places could become cages. And someone powerful still wanted to finish what they started. Hours later, inside a secured government facility, Rachel laid out the plan. "You and Sophie will be relocated tonight," she said to Mr. Jameson. "Different identities, different lives." Mr. Jameson stiffened. "My company?" "Forget the company," Rachel interrupted. "You can't protect Sophie if you're dead." Sophie sat quietly nearby, hugging her doll, eyes wide. "I won't leave," Mr. Jameson said stubbornly. Rachel slammed the file onto the table. Inside were surveillance photos of Mr. Jameson leaving his office, Sophie playing at the park, their home from every angle. "You don't have a choice," Rachel said. "They already know everything." Across town, in a dimly lit office filled with smoke and whispered voices, a man in an expensive suit reviewed the night's events. A crooked smile twisted his face. "We missed the girl," he said calmly. "But we won't miss the father." Beside him, a figure in shadows, someone from inside Jameson Enterprises, nodded. "We have a way to get him. Tomorrow, the charity gala." The suited man leaned back, pleased. "Make it clean, make it public." Because this wasn't just about revenge. It was about destroying everything Jameson built. Later that night, in a quiet, secure hotel room, Mr. Jameson sat at the foot of Sophie's bed, his head in his hands. "I should have seen it coming," he whispered. Sophie reached out, placing her tiny hand on his back. "It's not your fault, Daddy," she said softly. Tears burned his eyes. "You deserve better than this," he choked. Sophie leaned into him, resting her head on his shoulder. "I just want you safe," she whispered. In that moment, Mr. Jameson realized something. He couldn't run forever. He had to fight, not just for himself, for her. The next morning, under heavy security, Mr. Jameson attended the Willow Creek Charity Gala. It was a major event impossible to miss without raising suspicion. The perfect opportunity for his enemies. Rachel and her team were everywhere, earpieces crackling, scanning the crowd, but no one could shake the feeling that something was wrong. Too many faces, too many exits. And somewhere in that sea of smiles and champagne, danger was waiting. As Mr. Jameson gave his speech, the lights flickered. Panic rippled through the ballroom. Gunshots shattered the air. Screams echoed off the gilded walls. Rachel tackled Mr. Jameson off the stage, shielding him with her body. Guards returned fire. Through the smoke and chaos, a masked figure charged, heading straight for Mr. Jameson. Daniel, still trying to redeem himself, shoved past fallen chairs and terrified guests, tackling the figure to the ground. They struggled, fists flying. The mask slipped. Daniel gasped. It wasn't just some hired thug. It was one of Mr. Jameson's closest executives, someone he dined with, laughed with, trusted. Rachel grabbed the executive by the collar, shoving him against the wall. "Who sent you?" she snarled. The man spat blood, laughing bitterly. "You think it's just about money?" he hissed. "It's about bloodlines. Power." "Correct." Rachel frowned. "What do you mean?" But before he could answer, before the truth could spill out, a sniper's bullet whizzed through the air. The executive jerked once and collapsed. Dead. Silenced. In the aftermath, as police secured the building and ambulances rushed the injured away, Rachel checked her watch and froze. "Where's Sophie?" she whispered. Mr. Jameson's heart stopped. He scanned the ballroom, the bathrooms, the exits. Nothing. Outside, the cold wind howled through the parking lot. And in the distance, unseen by all, a black SUV disappeared down the road with a small figure curled in the back seat. The camera pans out from the glittering chaos of the gala and fades to black. The gala ballroom was a battlefield of shattered glasses, overturned tables, and haunting echoes of gunfire. But none of that mattered, because Sophie was gone. Mr. Jameson stormed through the corridors, his voice hoarse from shouting her name. "Sophie!" Rachel, bruised and furious, coordinated with security teams, scanning the footage frame by frame. And Daniel, guilt etched across his face, searched the surrounding streets, desperate to undo the wrongs he once helped set in motion. But time was slipping through their fingers. And somewhere out there, Sophie was alone and scared. Hours later, back at the security headquarters, Rachel found something. A flash on the gala's surveillance feed, a black SUV with no plates, lingering outside longer than the others, a glimpse of a face through a tinted window, a man with a scar slicing across his cheek. Rachel froze. She recognized him. "Victor Mason," she whispered. "A mercenary, no loyalties, no limits." Mr. Jameson leaned over her shoulder. "Where would he take her?" Rachel's mouth tightened, where no one would think to look. Meanwhile, in a dim warehouse on the edge of town, Sophie sat huddled in a cold metal chair. The ropes around her wrists bit into her skin. The scar-faced man crouched in front of her, a chilling smile on his lips. "Don't worry, little princess," he said softly. "You're worth more than gold to the right people." Sophie tried not to cry. Try to be brave. Her father had promised he would always find her. She had to believe it. She had to. Rachel gathered her team. "This is a Black Ops extraction," she said. "No backup, no calls, no time." Mr. Jameson grabbed a bulletproof vest, strapping it on himself. "I'm coming," he said, brooking no argument. Rachel didn't protest. She understood. This wasn't just a rescue. This was a war for the soul of their family. Daniel approached quietly. "Let me help," he said, voice shaking. Rachel's eyes narrowed. "You don't get to ask for forgiveness." "I'm not asking," Daniel said. "I'm earning it." Mr. Jameson stared at him for a long moment, then nodded once. "Because sometimes you needed every broken soldier you could get." Under the cover of darkness, they reached the warehouse. Rachel disabled the perimeter alarms. Daniel mapped guard rotation. Mr. Jameson steeled himself. They moved like shadows, slipping between beams and crates. Inside, Mason lounged on a battered sofa, sipping coffee, utterly confident. Sophie was locked in a side room, trembling in the cold. Rachel gave hand signals. Daniel and two agents moved to create a diversion. Rachel and Mr. Jameson positioned themselves by the main door. On Rachel's mark, they struck. Gunfire shattered the night. Screams echoed against the steel walls. Daniel tackled a guard, slamming him into a crate. Rachel fired clean, methodical shots, taking down another. Mr. Jameson fought with a ferocity he didn't know he had, fists fueled by fear and love. Mason fled deeper into the warehouse, dragging Sophie with him. "Come any closer and she dies," he bellowed. Rachel and Mr. Jameson froze. In the chaos, Sophie did something incredible. With Mason distracted, she kicked her chair backward hard, slamming into his knees. He stumbled, cursing. Rachel seized the opening, firing a shot that grazed Mason's shoulder. He dropped Sophie, just for a second. Enough for her to scramble toward Mr. Jameson, sobbing. He caught her, pulling her into his arms, shielding her with his body. "You're safe," he whispered. But it wasn't over! Not yet. From a catwalk above, a second mercenary, unseen until now, lifted a rifle. Rachel spotted him too late. She screamed, "Get down!" Mr. Jameson turned, shielding Sophie. A shot rang out. Rachel fired back wildly. Daniel tackled Mr. Jameson and Sophie to the ground. Chaos erupted again. When the smoke cleared, Sophie was gone, snatched by Mason, dragged into a hidden tunnel beneath the warehouse. Mr. Jameson staggered to his feet, eyes wild. No, Rachel cursed under her breath. Mason had planned for everything, and now he had a second chance, a head start. The camera zooms into the dark, yawning mouth of the tunnel, and fades to black. The tunnel reeked of damp earth and old rust. Mr. Jameson's footsteps pounded through the narrow corridor, every breath ragged. Rachel and Daniel sprinted behind him, weapons drawn, adrenaline burning through their veins. Up ahead, Sophie's small screams echoed faintly, each one twisting deeper into Mr. Jameson's chest. He would not lose her again. He couldn't. The tunnels branched and twisted like a labyrinth. Rachel scanned the ground quickly, spotting faint scuff marks from Sophie's shoes. "This way," she shouted. They plunged deeper, flashlight beams slicing through the darkness. Somewhere ahead, Mason dragged Sophie, panting heavily. He could feel his advantage slipping. Desperation bled into his movements. He knew if he got to the other side, to the waiting helicopter, he could disappear forever. But Mr. Jameson wasn't giving up. Not this time. They burst into an open cavern at the tunnel's end. Moonlight poured in from a jagged hole in the ceiling, and there, just a few feet away, Mason held Sophie in a brutal grip, a gun pressed against her temper. "Stay back," he roared, eyes wild. "I'll do it." Mr. Jameson raised his hand slowly. "Let her go," he said, voice shaking with fury and fear. "You don't have to do this." Mason sneered. "It's too late for mercy." Rachel aimed carefully, finger on the trigger. Daniel flanked to the side quietly, inching closer. Sophie, trembling but determined, whispered something only Mason could hear. His eyes flickered, distracted for a split second. And in that moment, Sophie bit his hand hard. Mason yelped in pain, his grip loosening. Rachel fired. The shot was clean, hitting Mason squarely in the shoulder. He staggered back, dropping the gun. Daniel lunged, tackling Mason to the ground. Mr. Jameson rushed forward, scooping Sophie into his arms, holding her so tightly she gasped. "You're safe," he whispered over and over, tears soaking her hair. "You're safe now." Within minutes, police backup swarmed the tunnels. Mason was hauled away in cuffs, bloodied and beaten. Rachel stood beside Mr. Jameson and Sophie, watching the flashing lights, breathing hard. "It's over," she said softly. Mr. Jameson nodded, pressing his forehead to Sophie's. "Over," he echoed, letting the words settle deep into his heart. Daniel stood off to the side, unsure, ashamed. But when Mr. Jameson caught his eye, he gave a small, grateful nod. Daniel had redeemed himself, not with words, but with action. Weeks later, life slowly returned to normal. Sophie laughed again, a real bright laugh that warmed every room. She started at a new school, where teachers cared more about her heart than her clothes. Mr. Jameson stepped back from his empire, choosing time with Sophie over boardrooms and contracts. Rachel was promoted, now leading security operations with a team handpicked by trust, not money. And Daniel? He became Sophie's official driver again, but more than that, her friend. They shared inside jokes now. A silent promise. No more betrayal, no more lies. One sunny afternoon, Mr. Jameson stood at the gates of Sophie's new school, holding a bouquet of sunflowers. Sophie raced into his arms, beaming. "Guess what, Daddy?" she said, eyes sparkling. "I made a new friend." Mr. Jameson smiled, hugging her tightly. "It's wonderful, sweetheart." She pulled back, suddenly serious. "And guess what else?" she whispered. He knelt down to her level.
I'm not scared anymore.
Tears filled his eyes, but they were happy tears this time. Because she wasn't just safe. She was strong. She was free. And so was he. They walked away hand in hand, the afternoon sun bathing them in gold. A new life. A new beginning. Together. In a world obsessed with appearances, real strength is invisible. It's love that fights in silence, loyalty that refuses to break, and courage that rises when no one is watching. What did Sophie's journey teach you? Have you ever had someone fight for you or had to fight for someone you love? Share your story in the comments. Your words could inspire someone else. And don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more powerful tales that remind us kindness, loyalty, and love are always stronger than fear.